Hello, hello. So this is super spontaneous today. I'm going to finish this week with a live stream just to show you some stuff that I didn't manage to write down. Those of you who watched the live stream on Wednesday probably saw that I worked on a concept on Notion, which was all about how to structure pages, page objects in Kirby 3. And there were quite a couple ideas around that in the last week, so I want to show you the progress on that. I don't find it anymore, so yeah, here, page object concept. So this basically started at some night this week where I just wrote down some ideas and thought about what page objects could look like if they are a bit more view inspired, more independent of each other, more easy to construct, more easy to work with. And so this concept was like the first starting point, and I wrote a couple of things in the meantime, couple of experiments, and so I'm going to show you the final result. Straight and easy. So what I did is I experimented with this idea of being able to construct a page in a very simple way to a view component, a similar way to view component. And my experiment so far is being called Kirby View. I don't know if it's going to stay that way, but that's it for now, just a working title. And I'm going to show you how a page would look like with this new way of constructing it. So this is pretty much it. So you start a CMS page. It's called page again. Also kind of a process this week. I went from entry to page, and yeah, we'll talk a bit more maybe about this. So the idea is that we follow a similar approach to what Vue does with props. Properties are basically object attributes which are kind of required sometimes, or kind of like working parts of it. And then there is flexible data, comparable to what we have right now in Kirby, what comes from the text file, so title, year, text, all kinds of stuff that basically like content fields. And then we have additional stuff like children, and also files, of course, at a later point. And the cool thing about this is that I started with just writing this in a way that you can build entire pages and entire page structures without even reading from the file system. So the idea would be that you can create a page object, and at a later point there will be an adapter that will read all this kind of properties, the data and the stuff from the file system whenever it's required. But for now, my first task was like finding a good way of creating those objects. So this is basically how it looked like. So you create a page, you put some props in. Props would be like the ID as it's here, the URL, the template. What do I have as well? Let me look. So here are the props, the slug, the parent. Then you can pass any kind of data in here. Yeah, doesn't make sense for a shop, but let's put it just in there. And then you instantly get access to all this. So in a very similar way to what Kirby 2 did, you would have an accessor for the ID, for the URL, for the title, for the year as well. Whatever you put into data will be available here as well, as long as it doesn't interrupt a prop. In that case, you can still go for the same thing that you did before with content year. Then it would, or data year, probably it's going to end up like that. So it will still be able to access that. And then with all the children defined, the children are basically just arrays again, which define subpages in the very same way. So props again, data again, props again, data again. There could be children again, so you can build the entire tree. And as soon as you did that, as soon as you constructed it that way, you can also access it like in Kirby 2. So you have a children accessor, can go for the first, for the last, and then access all the stuff of the child. So title, URL, whatever you find in there. Very much similar to what we have so far. And what I like so much about it is that it starts to become very clear what a page really is. So it's much less hidden in the page object itself, and it's also, it becomes possible to create entire page structures or entire entry structures in memory. And seeing this for the first time was thinking like, okay, this could be really cool. So this means we could totally abstract the way that pages are being stored. So for example, some pages might not even be stored at all. I'm just making ideas here, so don't take my word for it that all this will land. But basically what you could do is, so my idea was to create some kind of page register later where you say, okay, this is the shop object, and then the shop object will be registered here. And so whenever you do something like site find shop, it would pull up this object. And this object could come from the file system, but in theory, it could also come from a database. It could also come from memory, as I said. Pretty open at that point, which I like. To give you a bit of an insight into how these objects look like now, because it's kind of not the typical PHP stuff. In a way, it's building stuff that is available in Vue as well. So we have properties, as you saw already. So properties are defined like this. Wait, I have a better example for that. So this is just the property class. You can reuse that in every other object, where you just register properties and you define a schema for the properties, which is also very similar to Vue. So you can say, okay, I want this type, this property type to be an integer, and I want it to be required. So it throws an arrow if it's not there. There can be strings, all kinds of classes, of course. And there can also be resolved attributes, which means that you can add an additional callback function that is being used to actually set the attribute or the property for the first time. We'll dive a bit more into detail there at a later point. So this is how you define properties. And as I said, you can reuse that in every class that you build that way. So this is the page class. I'm using it here to create the page properties. I'm also using it in the site class to create the site properties. So the site is constructed in a very similar way as well. It has much less properties, but as you can see, works in the same way. So, and you would create the site object in the same way as the page object. And it could even be that the user objects are created in the same way, because yeah, they are quite similar as well. And another thing that you can see here is that I have properties. I have the data subclass, which is very similar to what has been there in Kirby 2. So you can have you can store data in a very simple way and pull it, and the data can automatically be converted to those field objects that we had in Kirby 2. So the field objects can have methods again. So this is basically what the data class does. And then we have events. So all those objects can have events as well. So as an example here, so this is how it's registered. The data has been registered like this. You tell what kind of field you expect from it. Then the properties, as I said, children are defined as a collection with a callback for each individual item in the collection. So this is very flexible as well. And then you have events, and the events it's all optional. So you just put into the object whatever you need. So if you don't need events, you don't put it in there. And then, for example, for the site, we have the site object. The site object has an update event, and we can listen to that. And whenever the site is being updated, let me show this. It's just a mocking method so far, but let's pretend the site would be updated here. It then emits the update event, and outside of the class, I can listen to that and say, on the update, I'm doing something with that. That would probably trigger a hook or do something else there. So it's quite flexible again. And then the result would just look like this. So you can dump this and say, okay, what happens with it? I'm just starting there. I'm experimenting with it. It feels pretty good so far. There are quite a lot of questions still to be answered. So how would this be connected with the file system? My idea would be for pages, for example, that you can just give the page. So let's make another example here. So for example, if you have a page, you can just give it a property called folder. Some folder, and then all the other properties would be automatically generated from that. But so this is one idea to do it. The other idea would be that there would be some kind of page fetching wrapper or something like that, where all these properties are just being created for the page. So I would have something like page at some folder, and that would be a static method which would then fetch the page data from the folder and create the page object for me and return that. So that would be another option. All still very much work in progress, but the first versions work really well so far. And the coolest thing, in my opinion, is that they are totally independent. I can test all of this stuff. I can mock all of this stuff. So I can mock really big scenarios with different URLs. Oh, another really exciting point, in my opinion, is with this option to inject the properties from the outside, it also becomes possible that we do something like this. And then, of course, the URLs of the children would change as well. So in theory, it could be possible to say we have the same pages or the same file structure, but some of the pages are located at a subdomain. Other pages are not located at that subdomain. So that might be possible as well with this way of doing it. Yes, this is the result for my week. Really quickly, just a couple insights. I will put this online, I hope, during the weekend or at least on Monday, so you can play with it. Could be kind of cool. And another cool thing about it is, since this is not relying on the file system so far, we can use this as a mocking base foundation, whatever, for the GraphQL, because all this stuff already works. And this means we can wrap the GraphQL queries around it that we already have, and we can easily ship that without providing any kind of data source to it. So I think it would make it easier for us to create a mocking API for the UI kit really quickly. I mean, as you probably heard, I'm pretty excited about it. I'm always careful because I know that often you build something, you get excited about it, and like 2 weeks later you realize that there are some kind of big issues in there which you didn't see. But I spent quite some time with it this week, and it feels good. And why I'm so excited about this, I mean, this is all just an array basically. So this means, in theory, we could also store this in a JSON file for smaller pages. Just have one little JSON file that produces an entire page for us, or an entire site for us even. or it could be in a YAML file or something like that. So lots and lots of options. Just one last thing, I wanted to quit, but I have one more thing I wanted to show. So in the same way that you would create children, I also want to handle the files. So you would be able to have the same thing for files. And again, as with all this kind of virtual structure, we have a lot more options how those files look like. So I don't know how this would be, something like, I don't know, just as an idea. And so far everything has been tied to the file system, so we sometimes got the question, is it possible to store those files on Amazon? And of course it has never been possible so far, because reading from there would be far too slow. But with this kind of virtual structure, it might be possible in the future. I'm really careful here. It might be possible to say, okay, the files don't necessarily have to be there on the file system. They could also be on some kind of Amazon bucket or whatever, and then you just reference it here and you pull data for the file in a totally different way, and you store it maybe in a JSON next to the page or something like that. Could also be possible. I'm experimenting. I'm going to experiment more, and of course if you want to experiment as well, just go ahead, help me come up with your own ideas. I'm always happy about additional input. So that's it. I'm just wishing you a great weekend. Hope you have a good time. There's not going to be a wrap-up article for this week, but I hope the live stream does a good job in that case. Thank you very much. Bye bye.